Hi there, my name's Chris Cant with Mining Journal, and with me I have Teresa Steele-Schober from SRK, and this is part of our Future of Exploration project. And today we're looking at ESG and how that fits in with the exploration piece. Hi, Teresa.
Hi, Chris.
Thanks for joining us. I wanted to start by just getting an understanding of how ESG relates to exploration. Obviously, when we're having conversations with the industry, it's almost always about development and then more pressingly producing mines and the footprint and the considerations. Is ESG even relevant for exploration?
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. At the exploration phase, just as people are getting excited about what a future mine might look like from a commodity and a revenue perspective, we're actually starting to understand the landscape and the context within which this project is going to be situated. And it's the ideal time to start understanding risks related to the context and to try and predict what those might be for the project going forward. And those risks can manifest entirely through the exploration cycle. So from things as simple as where do I get water from for the drill crews while they're on site, to understanding the social context, who lives around this property, what are they currently using the land for, are there sensitive receptors that either are legislated in terms of the land use in those areas where you may not be able to undertake exploration, but what are the current and anticipated future land uses that you need to be aware of, which could later impact the development of a mining project. So it's always, better to be proactive and understand risks before it becomes a costly exercise to try and mitigate them once you get into the construction and further production phases.
You've outlined quite a diverse raft of possible risks and potential risks that could go wrong. I guess at that early stage, anything can happen, right? So it is a really open question. When you're looking at projects and you're assessing risk and you're watching these projects as they go through their life, do you see any trends of certain risks in certain places that are more prevalent, that seem to come through and become reality more often than others?
Yes, some of them, it's the beauty of hindsight. You get to a point where you're like, oh, we need this much water for our processing operations. Where the hell are we going to get that water from? But actually, in the beginning, if you'd figured out that the catchment was in a water-stressed area, climate change predictions are anticipating lower rainfall in that period of, in that area in the future, you could have predicted it, because we know it takes a long time to develop a mine. So 10 years, probably more in most jurisdictions. So doing that predictive anticipation as early on in the project helps you manage those risks once you get to the construction and the operational phase. We've had enough experience of mines around the world that have had issues, whether it's with adjacent communities, whether it's with water, biodiversity. Those attributes existed in the landscape before the mining operation commenced. People just didn't necessarily pay attention to what those issues were and recognize the importance of addressing those as part of planning the project. And so, yeah, hindsight is perfect. You could have seen it in the past. Let's learn from it and do better in future.
You mentioned climate, Teresa, there in terms of forecasting. Is that something that you're seeing companies generally get better at, that they understand that they need to actually start considering climate change? Climate change is here, and they're better at planning and managing those risks?
It's a mixed bag, Chris, to be honest. Some companies have taken it on board. They have internal policies and procedures on climate predictions. They mandate the conducting of climate vulnerability assessments and adaptation assessments as part of their project development study programs. But for others, it's still very much a completely unknown, unconsidered impact. For the junior exploration guy who just wants to get a viable project and sell it on to someone else, they're not really focusing on climate issues at the moment. They just want to, develop a nice chunky mineral reserve statement and send it on its way to the next investor.
Sure. And if we take that climate is one part of the ESG picture that is evolving, and hopefully the industry is starting to get a better handle on that and be a bit more proactive with it. If we're looking out 10, 15 years from an ESG perspective, Where do you see the future of exploration, and how are things going to change materially over that period?
I think if we look at it through the climate lens, it's quite a useful way to phrase what the future might look like. Because if you are taking on board the climate predictions for that area, really understanding what the vulnerabilities might be, we can be anticipating and designing projects that have the lowest impact given that rapidly evolving context. Whether it's from water demand, sizing of infrastructure, placement of infrastructure, all of those, the entire concept of the mining project can be designed in a way that is more respectful of the context. And that starts at the exploration phase. Obviously, you're trying to figure out where the ore body is. We can't move the ore body. We all know that. But there's a lot of creative ways that you can approach, even from the exploration activities on site. You can start and understanding, anticipating, gathering data that is incredibly valuable when you start predicting and planning for a full-scale mining operation.
Teresa, that's all we've got time for, but thanks so much for joining us.
All the best. Thanks, Chris.